The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their sole purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's guest was featured in People magazine. His name is David Funes, and he's here to share his story about how he became manic and it just about ruined his world. Let's welcome David.
Hey, Andrea.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I read a little bit of your story, and you talked about this first episode when you were 4 years old watching your father choke your mother. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually my very first memory was of my dad choking my mom. I don't know exactly how it all transpired. From what I remember, she had locked him out of the house. He was drunk, I believe on drugs as well. He was a cocaine user. But yeah,
Okay.
he was livid when he broke back in. And I just remember being in the living room, crying and as I'm watching him choke my mom and basically begging for him to stop.
Yeah. And for the people that are listening, if you're wondering why we're starting with this, I think David will dive into it a little bit more, but we're starting with this because childhood trauma is part of what can lead to these manic episodes and these breaks, right? So go ahead and share what you've learned about that.
Yeah, so I'm bipolar, as we're definitely going to jump into all the craziness of that. But yeah, Andrea, you're exactly right. So bipolar is typically caused by genetic predisposition, which I, definitely have that, especially on my mom's side of the family, and then also trauma.
Mhm.
So especially when you put those things together, there's a, much higher likelihood of someone having bipolar or developing bipolar disorder.
Would you almost relate this similarly to, I think, with diabetes as well? Like if we are possibly going to develop it because it's a hereditary thing, it's something where it's important for us to watch what we're eating and watch our diet. And is it similar in that aspect a little bit? Like if you already have the genetics for it, that you should be kind of, or a parent, I suppose, should be more cognizant to the traumas that their child is exposed to?
Yeah, in theory, I think that's right.
Okay.
My family didn't really think about that. So I was raised in a very religious family, and mental illness was kind of more like a taboo thing. And so we didn't really know about that. And later on, when I had my first depressive episode, my parents thought it was more like a religious thing, like a sin issue, and that I needed to basically repent of what I was doing wrong. So yeah, they didn't honestly have the knowledge of what it was. And now they do. They've grown a lot since then with their understanding of mental illness. But yeah, that's kind of how mental illness was approached growing up for me. It wasn't a real thing.
I'm curious to ask about your faith in all this as years went on and looking back on this memory that you had as a child and your dad choking your mom, but yet you're living in this religious household. I just want to ask, were there times you were thinking, where were you, God?
Yeah, so really kind of what happened with that is my dad cheated on my mom for several years. My
Okay.
mom finally ended up leaving him and marrying my stepdad, and that's where things got uber religious or super
Okay.
religious. I guess my thinking in that is that my mom, there's also trauma that she went through that I have to acknowledge. I
Right.
think with all of that, they turned to like order in the face of chaos. And it was this very strict religion where the church we went to said that women shouldn't wear pants and Christian rock music's of the devil. So we just had all these crazy rules growing up. And that's where I think that came from is maybe my mom's trauma caused them to turn to that.
Interesting. Okay. So your biological dad was not religious. Is that kind of what you're saying?
He was, but he like totally fell away from
Oh,
it, started using drugs and alcohol and just became a different person than when my mom married him.
okay. I don't even know how to ask this question, but yeah, so your mom, what did it just happen one time?
The only time I ever saw was the
Okay.
one time.
Okay.
Yeah. But as an impressionable kid, that's yes,
Ab-
memory.
Absolutely. All it takes is one experience to witness and take on that emotion forever. Absolutely. So, what happened from there? Your mom gets divorced. She meets your stepdad. And then what happens with you? How does your mental health go from there?
Yeah. So when I graduate high school, my parents say I have two choices. Basically, I can go into the military, which is what my stepdad did, or I can go to a Christian college, a strict Christian college. So yeah, I ended up going to Bible college basically. And when I was 20 years old, I had my first major depressive episode. It was very scary because it came out of the blue. There was really no catalyst, anything that caused it.
Stress at school, though?
No, this is because this is like my second year at school. The first year I had no issues. And that's the thing about bipolar. The episodes can come out of nowhere or there can be something that causes it. But I think kind of the way I describe it typically is I think with the genetic predisposition, along with the trauma, there was just finally like almost like a dam that burst.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it can hit you at a time that's not expected.
Got it.
And I went from being like a straight A student, doing very well in all my classes, to not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to talk to my friends, starting to fail assignments and tests. And it was a very scary situation for me. So finally, at my wits' end, I went to see the school doctor and he prescribed me my very first depressive medication.
Mhm.
And that kind of started my journey in figuring out my bipolar disorder. But at this time, I'd only had that depressive episode. So bipolar wasn't even in the discussion yet.
Mhm. Okay. So then okay, so what happens from there? So you get on this antidepressant, do you start feeling better?
No, it actually gave me really bad side effects. So I stopped taking it after like 3 days. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, I couldn't sleep. It was giving me nausea.
Okay.
And I think that's something that's really hard for people with mental illness. You mentioned diabetes or other medical issues. There's typically a solution that works well for most everyone. But with
Mhm.
mental illness, a lot of us are having to try multiple things before we find what works for us. It can take years, which it
Yeah.
did for me. And it's just a much different process.
No, I can relate. I took, like, every antidepressant under the sun when I was in my teenage years. And I struggled with depression and had no idea why. I just knew I felt sad. I just knew I didn't feel like I wanted to be here and I couldn't figure it out. And none of the antidepressants really did anything for me. All they did was make me feel numb. And I mean, eventually I realized it was these thoughts that I had taken on in the way that my brain was working and wired and thinking. So essentially, none of those medications would have ever worked. But it took years and years of different therapists and different drugs and all that to finally figure it out and finally find a therapist that was, I want to say, like worthy. Like
Yeah.
the rest of them, it was just like, "Oh, you're sad? Here, you'll be better now." And it's like, I wasn't at all. So I completely relate to that piece of it. It's definitely not a one size fits all sort of cure, but there definitely is another side to it. And I'm so glad you're sharing your story because I think so many people need to hear this because also I want to talk about the part of mental illness, there's so much shame around it. You don't want to go running around telling people, "Oh yeah, me too. I'm sad too." Nobody wants to do that. Nobody does that really. And so everybody just suffers in silence. What was it like at that point in time? I mean, were you kind of hiding it from the world that you were, well, you took antidepressants for 3 days, but you could hide it for 3 days. No.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, so I had actually reached out to my family before then, and they again told me they thought it was like a sin or religious problem. They had told me that before the medication, but when nothing else worked, I finally at my wit's end had gone to the doctor, but I didn't even tell my family I went to the doctor because yeah, I knew that they wouldn't have agreed with what I did. I did keep it under wraps for the most part because, again, there was a lot of shame with just not knowing what's wrong with you. And because I didn't understand depression or bipolar or any of these things, I just thought I was like an inferior human being, I guess, at that point.
I think it's such an important piece to talk about, though, with the family and their response because people need support. It is not something that is easy to get through alone. You can, but it is not easy. And I think that's absolutely the wrong way to go about it, telling somebody that it's just like this devil thing and you've taken on, I don't know, the wrong beliefs or whatever they were
Yeah.
telling you. And I think the right attitude is, how can I help you? And then checking in on that person. Like, what can I do for you? Have you made any strides? Have you made any appointments? Are you on medication? How's it going? Okay, like you need somebody there to support you because it's not easy for sure. But what are your thoughts on that? How somebody can be of support to somebody?
Yeah. And I will say about my family, to their credit, they are very supportive now. I think it just,
But you know what you know. So let's, yeah, obviously not going to blame them
yeah.
for in that time and in that moment responding that way. I also think, it's 2025. We have so many more resources now than we ever did. And so it's very different. And it's very easy to say, do your research, do all this, because it wasn't like, I mean, when I was younger, because I'm almost 40. So for me, we're talking over 20 years ago. So it
This
wasn't
was
that
20
easy.
years ago, exactly. So you're right. Things have, although we're not where we need to be as far
Yeah.
as, but we've made a lot of advances toward people. The stigma's not as bad as it was. I think people are opening up to share more.
Mhm.
But yeah, to answer your question, I think being there for someone, you may not understand the mental illness yourself, but I think with mental illness, one of the biggest problems is people isolate when they're mentally ill or struggling. So the best thing you can do is kind of sit with them in the mud and kind of
Mhm.
sit with them with it. And then, of course, encourage them to get the help that they need through a psychiatrist, a therapist, whoever it is. But just really being there for them, not being too pushy, but at the same time, through love,
Mhm.
recommending that they get help. But yeah, just being that support system for sure.
And I always tell people, don't back off with the support when that person seems like they're doing really well.
Yeah.
Because people sometimes think when people are really at the brink and about to, don't even like to talk about this, but like at the point of wanting to commit suicide sometimes, I mean, I don't know if it's 50-50, but there's the people where it was very obvious. And then there's the, I don't know, I was just with them. They seem so happy. Like, I can't believe this. I'm shocked. And so I always tell people, if you know they've been struggling, don't back off just because all of a sudden they seem really happy and they're acting like everything is really good, because that might be very intentional on their part. They know they wanna follow through with their plan, and they don't want anyone stopping them.
Yeah, because later on, as we get through my story, I did almost end my life, but no one around me would have thought that because a lot of times when you're mentally ill, we think that it's much more obvious to other people than it is, but our inner landscape is not as obvious as we think to people.
Right.
A lot of it's such an inner thing that most people don't realize just how close someone might be to ending things.
Okay, so go ahead then and keep going with the story. You took your meds 3 days, you quit.
Yeah. Yeah, so my type of bipolar is a long cycling bipolar. I think this episode had lasted a couple months. So that was my first depressive episode. And really, because there's so much of the story, I'll go more
Okay.
quickly through my early 20s. So I got married while I was in college, had a couple I mean, I had a couple. I did have my first manic episode, but I call it a baby manic episode because it wasn't that bad compared to the just craziness and out of control the rest of my life. I had a couple more depressive episodes similar to this one. But then at 26 years old, I had my very first major manic episode. And what that looked like for me is, so obviously I went to Bible college. I probably drank at this point like 5 times in my life. I'd only been with one girl, was my wife on our wedding night. So very, very, not a crazy life at all. But when I had this manic episode, everything changed. First, it feels good because you get a bunch of extra energy. Your confidence gets through the roof. You don't need a lot of sleep. But then, so I describe it kind of as it feels good till it doesn't or goes out of control.
Yep.
After that, like my sex drive went through the roof, became more reckless and impulsive. I ended up buying a third vehicle, even though we didn't need it. I was trying to buy a second house. One symptom of mania is the rational part of your brain kind of gets turned off and you kind of go into this pleasure seeking mode a
Okay.
lot of times without realizing it. And that's where I did probably what I regret most of all the things I've done. I ended up just basically out of the blue cheating on my wife and ended up basically going home and telling her the next day and just leaving her for good. And my life completely changed at that point. That first night I cheated on her was the very first time I'd ever been drunk. And after that, I went from never drinking to partying 6 nights a week, went to my first club, didn't even know what that was, and just became like an unrecognizable person to everyone else around me.
Wow. Okay. So the girl you cheated on your wife with, did you even know her? Or was this just like you were so manic, you just found somebody random and it just.
This girl was a girl that I
Mm.
worked with. I was just so different than my character. I was actually more of an introvert. I never really
Mhm.
talked to girls. I was really shy, but the mania just gave me this crazy confidence. Like I
Mhm.
said, the crazy sex drive, and just went from that to basically going out 6 or 7 nights a week, starting to sleep around, and just became worse and worse from there. Well, during that manic episode, I was telling you about this earlier, just to show how mania can get. While I was still married, I fell in love again with another girl. She was a foreign nanny or au pair, and didn't tell her I wasn't divorced because on my manic mind, it didn't really matter. So I fly to Mexico with her because I find out she's about to have to go back at the end of her 1 year nanny term.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to her mom and brother and getting permission to marry her while I'm still married. So again, rational part of your brain is off. I think I'm in love with this girl. I think she's the new love of my life. And this happened several times over the years. But then we get back, we're ring shopping, and I'm hit with another major depressive episode
Okay.
and back to where it was before. But this one was the worst depressive episode I'd had. And that's where I alluded to earlier, where I became suicidal. And all I could think about at that point was ending my life. Almost did a few times, but finally through pills, through other different methods, I don't have to get into all that, I guess, but finally I had a moment of clarity, realized that I didn't want to die necessarily. I just wanted to get rid of the pain I was feeling from the depression. So I packed a bag and I drove to the nearest mental hospital, and I was scared to death to go there because I didn't know how long I'd be there. Would I be stuck there forever? I had no ideas, but I had to push past my fear. So I checked myself in there, and while I'm there, I see a doctor. And that's when I was finally diagnosed as bipolar. This is 27 years old now. So 7 years from the initial depressive episode.
Mhm.
Figured that out through questioning and figuring out I had left my wife, this whole partying thing, trying to get married while already married. Just all these, it don't make sense for normal people to do. Textbook bipolar though. So that's where I was diagnosed after he understood that other
Mhm.
side, the mania.
I'm so proud of you for checking yourself in because that, that takes a lot. It takes a lot for somebody to go do that, for sure. But I was asking about, because people are like, why did she randomly ask that? But I was asking about the first person that you cheated on your wife with, because I'm wondering, Was that part of your work kind of dissolving as well? Did that mess with your work life? You're saying she was a coworker and, was that also where your work life started to get a little bit messy because she probably was watching you closely. Obviously, now she had a little bit more of an interest in you and was seeing how your behavior was.
Not at that point. Later, though, it definitely did. I think where my work life really went south is when I started doing drugs.
Okay.
And so to kind of get there, I was in that mental hospital for I think 5 days. They ended up putting me on some meds for my depression. They told me afterwards if I responded well to that, they'll put me on something for the mania. But when I get out of there, because the depression's getting better, I tried the stuff for the medication for the mania. It did not work well for me. Turned into a walking zombie, basically. So again, stopped taking it after a few days and was thrown back into another manic episode after that depressive episode.
Mhm.
And so that's when I got involved in drugs. Started the first drug I did was Molly and ecstasy at like an EDM events. But then, and I didn't become addicted to that. I used it quite a few times, but not like every day or anything, just at those special events. But I tried cocaine, and when I did coke for the first time, I that was the drug that really got me because I just loved the way it made me feel. But with the mania, it just made it that much worse because you already have kind of this crazy wildness with the mania, and the coke just takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah. I can imagine you were probably like, woo,
Yes.
oh, I mean, not funny, but yeah.
No.
Oh
That's
my
where work started going downhill though, because I'm in the bathroom at work. I was a financial advisor at the time. I'm in the bathroom doing coke. I'm in my car doing coke, and I quickly started using all day, like pretty much every day. It quickly disintegrated into that, and
God.
then that's where
What was happening at work? I mean, were you functioning somewhat normally or were you just like making bad investments? Like, oh, that
yeah,
was it today. Yeah.
I think the main thing was I was constantly showing up late to work, looking haggard and hungover because I would be out till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever it was, pretty much every night, then
Yeah.
showing up in the morning looking disheveled. And
Yeah.
so I think it was more the way I looked and carried myself. At that point, I wasn't like hurting the clients couldn't
Yeah.
tell because they're over the phone, luckily, instead
Yeah.
of in person. But
I'm just like wondering, could their bank accounts tell? You know,
no, I
who
don't.
is making these investments?
No, luckily, I was at one of those bigger firms that they help with the investments that you should make. So it wasn't me just doing these harebrained things. It's kind of mutual funds that were already
Okay.
managed. So luckily, I
Okay.
wasn't screwing up anyone's account.
Okay. Well, oh gosh. People are gonna hear this and be like, he was my advisor. I gotta look back at that time. It's just like,
Gosh, that was so many years ago. I don't think they can.
oh well, that's good. Okay. So go ahead and keep going with your story. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So after that is when things got really crazy because I meet some party friends and find out they have this scheme going on and they're making tons of money doing it. And I wanted more money, not to buy anything cool. I wanted more money to party harder. All I wanted to do is party at this point. It was pharmaceutical sales fraud, basically, is what they were doing. And I was like, hey, I want to do this too. You guys are making a ton of money. And just very quickly to get into it, it was compounding medications where it's these topical creams where if you put certain ingredients together, they can bill out a very large amount to an insurance company. And all the insurance companies had pretty much wised up to it, except for the government's insurance, TRICARE.
I'm learning so much right now.
Yeah, this actually, we're not the only company that did this. I'm sure some people got away with it, but this is in Florida. A lot of people got busted for this type of thing. But yeah, so TRICARE would pay out like ten to $20,000 a month for this cream.
Are you allowed to say this?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
allowed to say this.
Okay. I don't know. Sometimes when you drop like name brands and things like that,
Mm.
it's like, meh, don't publish that.
Oh no, I've already been in trouble with all of this, so I'm allowed to talk about it. But because yeah, this is all over with now. But they would bill out $10,000 to $20,000 a month with these creams, and I would get a cut of it. Let's just say it was a $10,000 cream. I would make like $2,000 a month off this cream. But to incentivize people to get it, we would be paying doctors and paying patients. So paying patients that had TRICARE insurance to go to the doctor, and then paying doctors to write prescriptions. I could pay someone $500 a month basically to go to the doctor and get this cream, and I'd be pocketing anywhere from 1,500 to over 3,000 a month on these. So just getting a few patients in the door, I was making more than my finance job doing this. And I don't know the exact amount I made, but I made well over $500,000 doing it until basically, and I guess, and I don't know, that I was living it up because I was making that much money. Now I'm getting VIP bottle service in Miami all the time, just partying in Miami, partying in Vegas. And we were just living this crazy life. We were going to the strip club at noon a lot of times and getting bottle service. It's just total degenerate behavior.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm manic and on drugs. So this is, in my mind, I was living it up
Yeah.
at that time.
Your best life.
I mean, and yeah, looking back, I'm like, that was not a good life. But manic David thought,
In your mind. Yes, exactly.
yeah. But then everything changed because in May of 2015, the FBI ended up raiding our office, and I found out I was facing up to 7 years in prison because it's not based on the amount of money you make. It's based on your loss amount to the government. And they said I cost the government $3.7 million. So I was facing 7 years based on that.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So when this happened, was that a wake up call?
No, because I
No.
was manic. Yes and no. Okay, so I guess to take a step back, yes, at first it was. I was hit with a depressive episode right away, which you could probably guess. And then my lawyer tells me, stay out of trouble. I don't know how long this is going to take, but just be good.
Right.
But my buddy and I decided to go on a trip to Vegas, and I was like, okay, maybe I can kick my depression. And I did because I was like, I'm going to do as much drugs as possible to try to
Oh,
kick my depression. And yeah, I ended up staying out there it was a 3-day trip, but I stayed by myself out there with all my new friends, all them for an additional 9 days. So I was in Vegas partying my face off for 12 straight days. I ended up in the hospital at one point. It was just not a good situation at all, but that's when my mania came back again. And instead of worrying about this case, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was back in that party mode, just doing the most with drugs again.
wow. Okay. So you made new
Doesn't
friends.
make sense.
Yeah.
Mania doesn't always make sense.
So you made a bunch of new friends in Vegas. It sounds
Yeah.
like. Okay.
Well, not real. It's
Well, obviously. Don't worry, I got that. I realize these were not real friends. I hope you do. These are the friends that you can buy. Those are not real friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Vegas and you stay there for 3 days. Is
12 and all.
12 days.
Yeah. Which
Okay.
you should not do. 3 is plenty.
Plenty. I think 0 would have been best. Okay, so you come back.
Right. I come back manic again, and I decide to move well, actually, I'll tell a quick manic in Miami story. There's so many bad things that happened in Miami. But so I come back, I get banned from some bars in Jacksonville where I'm living for just various things. I got banned for life from my favorite bar. So I decided to go, I got kicked out 3 times. So they banned me.
Probably.
But what's that?
Probably for the best.
Yeah, I mean, it was the 3rd time they said I was doing aggressive pull-ups from the 2nd floor, and I could have hurt myself, I guess. So the other times were drug related, fight related, but yeah, the pull-ups is what got me banned, I guess.
Yeah, just trying to work out. Gosh,
Yeah.
poor guy.
The coke just always made me want to do the most. So then I decided to go to Miami for 4th of July instead. And while I was there, I originally went with one girl that I flew out from New York. But we got in a fight because I brought randoms back to the hotel, basically went to get more alcohol, and she woke up to random people having sex in our room. So obviously she wasn't happy and left. Then I had met another girl, hung out with her for 2 days, fell in love again, just like with the nanny. And she had a boyfriend that she was living with in Baton Rouge, but I convinced her to break up with him and move with me to Austin and become my girlfriend after only knowing her for a couple days.
That's
So,
impressive.
I don't know.
I
I'm
know.
sure she had her own issues also. I don't know what they were.
Yeah.
But, yeah, she moves with me to Austin, and then not too obviously, as you can probably guess with that, it didn't work out well for me. She ended up
Mm.
also cheating on me, leaving me. But now I'm in Austin, and, yeah, I guess the next thing I would say is I didn't know what to do. I have all this money still, but I don't know what to do with it. So then I asked myself, "What do I like to do most?" And partying. So I
Oh,
ended up buying an after hours nightclub, invested with another guy so I could just party it up in my own club. I didn't care
oh,
about
great for following your heart. Like,
yeah.
what do I love to do the most?
Yeah.
Right.
I was following my passion.
Hence, yeah, the next question though is this good for me?
That question was never asked back then.
No. Okay.
No,
All
not
right.
at all.
We have the nightclub.
So I have a nightclub. It's after hours nightclub basically. So I'm single then and I ended up going to the strip club. I meet this dancer there and love at first sight,
Of
basically.
course, because you're David.
Again, yeah. I try to buy her a drink. She says she can't have a drink, points down. She's wearing an ankle monitor. And she had 2 DUIs in the space of 3 months, but I fell in love with her anyway. And
Oh my God.
she then moved in with me to my condo instead of the other girl. So now I have the nightclub.
Oh my
Oh, it gets worse though.
the other girl, like, sorry, you're out next.
It gets way worse though, because then I end up with meeting this new dealer. I drive my Coke dealer and I don't know, we loved hanging out. I met him, we partied all day. He stayed with me that night and we kept partying for several days and he never really left. He moved into my spare bedroom and in exchange for a discount on Coke.
Yeah.
So now it's me, the dancer, the drug dealer. And that's really when my decline started because I was using the most I've ever used because I've got this guy a few feet away in my spare bedroom with the supply.
Oh my gosh. And a new girlfriend, right?
New girlfriend. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Hmm.
Yeah. It gets worse though. We end up,
It gets worse.
yeah, it does. Well, first of all, yeah, this guy's name is, we call him Ciroc Poppy because he's a big Ciroc fan. So I ended up meeting some other characters through him and we moved some more people into the house. It's a 2-bedroom condo, big condo, but then I have a bouncer sleeping on the couch.
I'm sure in your mind it was not 2 bedrooms. In your mind, you're living in a castle or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
come
King of
on
the castle.
over.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we've got these other 2 kids that Ciroc Poppy had hired to hit a lick and they got caught on camera. So they were potentially in trouble. So I've got them sleeping there. And it's just this crazy, cast of characters that are all there at the condo at that point. But with my using, everything just falls apart. Ended up, the other owner didn't want me to, we had a falling out basically. I bought him out of his share of the after hours club. And then all the other employees quit because they hated me because I was a terrible owner. The other owner managed properly, wanted to make money. I was always in the biggest VIP section, partying, dropping things, breaking things, being belligerent.
Huh.
The office was a drug den. So everyone quit. And then I ended up hiring these characters that I was hanging out with to run the club. I let Ciroc Poppy manage it one time. I had this meth head guy that meth head David, different David that was, I let him manage the club and I'm just bleeding money at this point. So blow through all my money. I had hundreds of thousands of dollars from the legal stuff and my legal stuff before that, but I blew through all of it within about a year of the FBI situation, lost everything, club went under and basically became homeless within a year. So you can see I wasn't necessarily trying to like make a bunch of money and buy a car or a house or like what normal people would be doing. I'm just spending it on crazy stuff and having fun and lost all of it.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I hear that. You were just on to the next thrill constantly. Wow. Okay. So I'm assuming we lose the girlfriend when we lose the house.
No, that is the crazy part.
Oh,
She did not leave me. Were living out of dirt cheap motels, and she was, didn't have any money left. So whatever money she made dancing is all we had. And she used to make a lot, but she got caught up in this life too. She's using a lot. So now we're barely bringing in any money. And to show you how messed up I was in the mania, I had left all my stuff in the condo when we were evicted from it. We got
mhm.
kicked out, electricity got shut off, everything. But I left all my furniture. I left all my nice stuff there. Didn't even try to sell it. Lost everything but what we could have in our suitcases. So we're
Wow.
living out of like Super 8s, just the cheapest motels basically for the next couple months. And yeah, you would think she would have left me, but she did not leave me through all of that. She actually really loved me. We ended up dating for 4 years.
Oh,
So yeah, most people would not have thought that. But yeah, we ended up living together, 4 years. Finally, after 2 months of living out of the motels, we're able to get a small studio apartment. All we had in the studio apartment, though, was an air mattress and like meat and cheese, peanut butter and jelly. We had nothing else. So I go from owning a nightclub, having hundreds of thousands of dollars, to living out of hotels, and then this apartment with just an air mattress, no other furniture. So obviously, at this point, I'm depressed again, couldn't get a job, bombing over 20 different job interviews. But finally, around this time, this was the end of 2017, where I finally was at my wits' end, able to go see the psychiatrist I still have today. And he really listened to me. I feel like he was very extensive in going through my whole history, and he was able to finally put me on the right meds. So this is probably 12 years after my first episode, 12 or 13 years after my first episode. But yeah, thankfully he was able to finally put me on the right meds. And at that point, I was probably a month or so afterwards, I started feeling stable and life completely changed.
okay. I want to ask though, I think it's obvious, but where did all of the money go? Drugs?
It went to the club, drugs. I gave a $60,000 loan to someone without even having them sign paperwork, just like sent me an email saying they'd pay me back. Of course they didn't. Partying all over. Yeah, it was mainly VIP bottle service. Like I'd go spend 10 grand on bottle service in Vegas in just one night. Money can go fast if you're
Oh,
partying the way I was. That stuff's expensive. So
yeah.
it was mostly things like that. The club going under, I lost that whole investment. So yeah, I blew through it in pretty record time through all this.
Yeah. Impressive.
Yeah.
What happened to the girlfriend? Did you get clean and she didn't want to get clean?
It's kind of like that. And I still care a lot about her because she was with me through all of it. But I guess what I would say happened is her dad passed away a couple years into our relationship. And when something like that happens, obviously, sometimes people turn to the wrong thing. I tried to be there for her because after I got stable, I was able to stop doing drugs and drastically cut back on my drinking. But she kind of went the opposite way after her dad passed. And I wanted to be there for her. I waited probably a year, but things just kept getting worse and worse. She'd be blacked out all the time. I'd be anxious having to try to find her. She'd fall asleep in Ubers. I didn't know where she was. And I guess at that point, she wasn't ready to get the help she needed. So I knew I finally had to, for my own sanity, had to end things. But the story for her does end well. She's doing great now. She's got a great partner. They're about to have their second kid, and she is doing a job she really loves now. So it worked out in the end for her, but that's kind of why that fell through for us.
Okay. People always want to hear how the love story ends. So
For sure.
we had to tie that one up. David, how did you end up in People Magazine? How did People Magazine end up picking up this story?
Okay. So let me jump to the end and that'll answer that question.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
so I'm stable on my meds now, right? But I'm still waiting on my prison sentence. That ends up hanging over 25th May of 2015. The FBI raids my office. My sentencing doesn't actually happen until last year, December of 2024. So I waited 9.5 years on a potential prison sentence hanging over my head. It's the longest case that my lawyer has ever been a part of on a federal level. And a lot of crazy stuff happened with the case, so it just kept getting pushed back. But finally, last December, I went to court for my sentencing. Very scary thing. Your life is in the judge's hands. But due to several factors, the extent of my mental illness and a lot of that had happened before, obviously I'd turned my life around and I was able to show her that. Plus just the severe length of the case, the judge understood all that and gave me a time served sentence. So what that means is I didn't have to serve any prison time. And she was honestly, she was kind to almost all the defendants in my case got the time served sentence. I think only two people did any time, but they had prior felonies and were like at the higher levels. So I think the most anyone did in my case was 1 year and the other guy did 4 months. But all of us were facing 7 years. And then I think some people were facing up to 20 years. But there's just a lot of mistakes made with the case on the other level. So it kind of worked favorably for the defendants.
Hey.
But that's kind of when People magazine, I think I started talking to them about my story. Was I made a TikTok video that kind of went viral about, I don't know. I was like, go big or go home. I'm headed to my sentencing. So I was in the airport and I made a video saying, hey, I'm on the way to my sentencing. I don't know what's going to happen. And like my TikTok stuff went off with that, I guess. And people found out about it, Business Insider and some other things. So that's how they found out, is covering the sentencing part and finding out about my legal stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've shared your story. You wrote a book, Manic in Miami.
Yes.
So I'm assuming in the book you share a lot of what you just shared, the stories, the craziness, the life that you were living. But do you share in there tips and tools and things for people to use and how to get better and how to get out of the manic episode or how to have a different life than you've been living?
Yeah, I thought with my book, I think how I would describe it is it's meant to entertain, but also encourage. So the first half of my book, the first section is called The Chaos. It's a bunch of crazy stories, a lot more that I didn't even get into just with all the things I got into, especially with my mania, but then also the depressive episodes and how low that can get. But then there's the second section of the book is called The Comeback. And it basically starts with when I was homeless and how I've been able to rebuild my life from there, because stories are great and I think they can be very entertaining. But if I'm not doing my part as a mental health advocate, if I'm not sharing how I came back from things and trying to help other people. So the book, I think, really does both. And that's what I do with my social media as well. I think what I'm trying to do is be a voice for people that are struggling, show them that they're not alone. A lot of people can't really talk about their mental illness because of their job or different things. So I think it's important for those of us that can. I decided about 2 years ago that my mission and purpose in life is sharing my story to help other people who are struggling. So I've just tried to do that in every way I can, through my socials, through my book, through coaching, through public speaking. I want to give my life to help other people and really help the 20-year-old me that didn't have anyone to guide them. I think back on that. And I think if I can help that type of 20-year-old me, that's really what I want to do with my life.
I think it's really admirable that you come out and you share all this because I think there's a lot of people that have had probably similar experiences because from what you're saying, and I know people that have suffered too with it, and you're very, very out of control of yourself. And it's so hard to say this because I don't want to be offensive, but I would say it's a little bit embarrassing, right? Like
Yeah.
when you come to the other side of your behaviors and you're clear headed, the stuff that you have done, you probably feel a little bit of embarrassment. And I think it's huge for you to just openly be sharing that. But I mean, it's similar for me with my life and my depression. I kept it quiet for a long, long, long time and never spoke about it. And there was just so much shame about not having your shit together, I think. And so I talk about it now and I know how much I suffered and I know how deep that pain can cut you. I really do. And I think it's similar for you, what you feel. You know how you felt and how bad it was. And I don't want that for somebody else. And saying
Yeah.
like, the mission is to just drive home hope for people and give people hope that their life can be different. And so that's why I share all these stories. Like yours is a little bit different. Sometimes I have, people that have had traumas from losing their limbs or losing someone they love or all these different things. But the point of all these stories is that we all go through something
Yeah.
and there is somebody out there that we can reach out to and connect with. There is a way out. And so I really appreciate you sharing all this.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad I'm able to do this. And yes, it's just really hard. I think the hardest part that bipolar people tell me and that I struggle with is we have to take responsibility, obviously, for what I've done. So I do take responsibility for all my actions, but it's very hard to know where I end and where the bipolar begins. So that's something I really talk a lot to people with mental illness and bipolar. So many of us are struggling with what's me and what's the disease. But yeah, in the end, you have to take responsibility for it. For me, getting on meds was the first step I had to take to become stable. And then I think you just have to, that there's a lot of work that can be put in, a lot of mental work, especially that can be put into my life's not perfect. I still struggle with things, but I call my account Bipolar Guy Loving Life because it's a mindset. I choose to love my life, even with all the bad things I'm going through. So that's just what I want to be able to show people is the life's not perfect. It's still messy with a mental illness, but there is hope to live a good, meaningful life.
And I think like you're saying, it's really important to release that guilt and that shame. That's something, you're talking about mindset, and that's something important that people that are suffering are going to have to work through at some point. Don't feel guilty and don't feel ashamed. I think you can certainly have reflection on it and think that wasn't a good choice,
Yeah.
but you don't have to harbor all this shame about what you did or all this guilt and feeling bad because it wasn't even you, right? Like it was this condition that you fully didn't even understand or know how to help yourself. And all you can do is move forward from where you're at now and knowing what you're dealing with. And I think there's a lot of people like you too. Initially, they didn't even know what they were dealing with exactly. They didn't know why they were doing what they were doing. And you're also, I think, so out of control, you can't even recognize that something's wrong in the
Yeah.
moment.
Shame is probably one of the biggest things we we deal with, especially for bipolar people, and I'm sure with so many other mental health issues. And yeah, all we can do is you still have to take the responsibility. Like I said, I tried to reach out to everyone I've heard and apologize in the most sincere way, even to my ex-wife. I wrote her a long letter as well. So I think you can take the steps to apologize and make amends. But from there, I think the best thing you can do for all parties is not get stuck in that, not live your life in that shame. But once you've done everything you can, you kind of have to set the past behind and
Mhm.
almost put blinders on. And I think the best thing you can do is if you're moving forward and living a better, different life, those other people you've hurt will see that and that they'll understand that you are taking steps to be a different person, whether it's getting on meds, whether it's doing the work. So yeah, living in shame and isolating is the worst thing you can do.
Well, and a lot of people have shame too that are not suffering necessarily with mental health stuff,
Right.
right? Everybody makes choices to learn. That's how we learn is we make a choice and then it didn't work out so well. And then we can choose how we're going to feel about it and move forward. And I think even in your own case, I mean, I hear what you're saying, put the blinders on, but I don't know if I agree completely with like put blinders on because I don't know if that's necessary. Like, I really think you can go back in time and look at these events and things that you did and things that you felt this shame around and look at it in a different light because you have so much shame for those things, but do you really? Because those are the very things that have put you where you are today and the very things that have helped you to change other people's lives. And so I feel like we can look at those events as grateful, like looking at those things that you've done, like, yeah, whoops, like that was that was bad David, but I'm not ashamed, right? I'm not ashamed of the David that I was because David 20 years ago didn't even know what he was doing. He didn't understand why he was operating the way he was. And he had tried to get help, but the help that he sought out didn't give him the right tools, right? When you were that first young boy trying to get help and they gave you drugs for 3 days and it didn't work. But this is where, yeah, the mental health space, we need doctors to be more educated on it and to understand it better and to be able to stay on top of their patients as well. Because when somebody comes in like you and somebody that's suffering, they need to be able to follow up. I mean, it's a whole system, right? It's a whole thing that's all messed up.
Yeah.
But no shame in your story, David. No
Yeah.
shame.
I totally agree with what you're saying. I think where I had to put the blinders on is I had starting over from being homeless and having to start over again with court thing. The blinders for me was I couldn't get stuck in my past and everything. So many people get stuck in their past, especially if they lose everything due to an event. So yeah, totally with the mental health, you do have to process that and work through it. But I think a lot of times if you're at rock bottom, which I try to speak to a lot of people who are at rock bottom, a lot of times they get so focused on what they used to have instead of focusing on the future. And that's more what I meant with the blinders, is kind of putting all your effort ahead of you and looking at the new life you're starting as a new starting line, because then you can celebrate all your small wins. Whereas if you're constantly looking back to what you used to have, you're never going to be happy with your progress. So I think it's just a lot of us with mental illness have to start over again. And we need to just be able to celebrate the small wins and reframe it as kind of a new starting line from here on out.
Yeah, no, I get that. I was just thinking we don't wanna bury stuff,
No.
right? We
Yeah.
don't wanna bury anything because that's where, like you were talking about before, your childhood and all these things, like, it was just kind of this low eruption is probably why the first incident happened in the first place, and so anything that you're just burying along the way is probably going to erupt again at some point, so
Yeah.
work through it and recognize that you've worked through it, and then that's it, like, now it's one foot in front of the other and we're moving forward.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Is there anything we missed from your story that people really need to hear?
No, I think why I mentioned what I just mentioned is, yeah, another part of this, I guess the one other part of the story I tell a lot is I have a couple felonies now. So I worked in finance after all this started. That's how I got my life back from basically being homeless. But I lost that job and had to start over again. So I went from making a lot of money again, rebuilt my life, to basically having to drive a delivery job for Amazon, making less than $20 an hour. So that's the other big thing that I had to go through over the last couple of years. But in that type of situation, what really helped me is I realized now wasn't forever. That's when I put the blinders on, is kind of what I was talking about. And I knew what my purpose was in life now, which is sharing my story to help others who are struggling. So instead of getting stuck in that job, I think a lot of us are going to go through these times where we're starting over. And instead of, getting stuck in that mindset, it's finding a purpose that's bigger than us, that can motivate us every single day, and then taking consistent action towards that. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the last 2 years, whether it's through going to Toastmasters to practice my public speaking, becoming a coach, posting consistently on social media, writing a book. Instead of getting stuck in the past and getting down, I think it's about finding a new purpose and going through as many doors as possible until you start to reach that. You don't know how to do it necessarily, but I did all these different things, figured out what worked, and been able to completely turn my life around. And now I'm doing something that is the only thing in life I'd want to do. So I guess I just want to say all that to encourage anyone else who's starting over, who's struggling, that there is hope. And if you put in the work and you find something that motivates you and gives you passion, and work towards it every day, you can turn your life around.
Yeah, I think with the blinders, really what you're saying too is just keep focus, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't get distracted. I think that's a huge thing to drive home for people is if you're trying to start a new life, there is a way to start a new life. What would be your number one thing if somebody's like, I need to start over, I don't know what to do? What's the number one thing they go do first?
Yeah,
Right.
I think that depends on exactly where they're starting over. If you're at rock bottom, obviously you need to get a job first. So for me, with the felonies, I had to take whatever job I can get.
Mhm.
But then I think what I had to do is, after getting that job, I dedicated all of my free time towards working towards a goal. So, obviously I told myself now isn't forever. This is a job you have to survive. But what is my real purpose and goal in life? And I think it's about spending all your free time that you can working towards that. So I was going to three Toastmasters meetings a week to practice my public speaking. I wanted to write my book. So I spent a bunch of time doing that. It's a lot easier if you have something else that you're working towards while you're obviously providing for your needs. So that, I think it's finding something passionate about and
Mhm.
being willing to put all your, free time into working towards that.
Mhm.
And really just, it's about just small, consistent steps every day towards those goals.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So, if people want to connect with you, what are the ways of connecting with you?
Yeah. So my socials, I'm mainly on Instagram and TikTok. That's at Bipolar Guy Loving Life. And then obviously, if they want to hear more of my story, there's, like I said, there's a bunch more stories in my book, Manic in Miami. It's out on Amazon. So anyone can get a copy of that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.